Welcome, comic book fans, to another episode of Slideshow Reviews, hosted by Geekality. It's January 2014, and this is Episode 8. Welcome back to Part 2 of this week's jam-packed Slideshow Reviews. Bloodshot and Hard Corps Issue 18 by Valiant Comics. This was another fine example of well-written, fun comic books coming out of the rejuvenated Valiant. Christos Cage and Joshua Dysart do a fine job of telling what should be a pretty straightforward superhero action story with an element of suspense and intrigue. They manage to infuse a bit of levity early on as well, and end the issue with a nice cliffhanger. As usual, a nice recap at the start of the issue fills readers in enough that new readers won't be overwhelmed. While not the best jumping on point for new readers, this is still not a bad place to start. That cover by Clayton Crane is fantastic. It just really turns me off how terrible the interior is compared to it. Bart Sears does a fine job of getting the story across in his Eric Larson SQ style, but it just falls so short of the marvelous cover. As Tom McFarlane once told me, I got suckered into buying based on the cover. I hate that strategy employed by publishers, honestly. Get an illustrator with the necessary talents to pull off doing both the cover and the interior. Don't get a great artist to do the cover and an inferior one to do the sequential pages. I just hate that. Facial expressions and anatomy were off, panel layouts were fine, though a bit simple. Line work was strong on the close-ups, but it got sketchy on wider shots. The colors really didn't do anything to improve the illustrations either. Overall, it seemed like work produced in the late 90s, and in 2014, publishers should really be past that level of work already. They should be striving for better. Still, this was a very entertaining read, and I recommend this issue to anyone loving superhero comics that have an edge to them. What I mean by that is that extra layer of thought and detail that most superhero comics lack. I can't recommend the entire series just yet, though being a fan of the original Hard Corps, I myself will be checking the series out. This issue was certainly worth the cover price. Bloodshot and Hard Corps Issue 18 gets a try. Shadow Man, Issue 14. The more I read the series, the more I like this urban dark fantasy. As I've said previously, the locale and dark fantasy elements of Shadow Man remind me so much of Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, which is never, ever a bad thing. Another well-written issue by Peter Milligan with strong dialogue and a natural ratcheting of suspense, and more moody illustrations by Roberto de la Torre and colors by David Barron that so wonderfully complement each line. This is just a wonderful, wonderful comic book to look at. It really is. The Shadow Man finds himself battling the ever-growing influence of the spirit that grants him his power. The Avatar that's assigned to watch over him must struggle with her growing affection for him and her duty to prevent unwanted destruction that stems from him losing control. Having reviewed many comics recently, I've begun to see a trend in writers that have a very difficult time maintaining the narrative thread, especially when they must jump back and forth through time with flashbacks. Peter has no such problems, as each flashback is handled with cinematic precision. The color palette changes beautifully from one scene to the next, denoting the difference in time or place. Just a bang-up job by the entire creative team on this issue. Overall, this was a fantastic issue, and I recommend everyone give this issue and the entire series a try. Note to those comic fans that are religiously inclined to shy away from certain subject matter, this comic deals with possession and mentions of voodoo and so forth. While it's nothing grotesque like The Exorcist, I sincerely doubt they'll enjoy this series very much. To everyone else, this is a marvelously written series with grim and gritty illustrations and colors that make for one hell of a title. I can't recommend this title enough. Shadow Man Issue 14 gets a big try. Little Battlestar Galactica by Dynamite Entertainment. While the regular Battlestar Galactica series bores me to tears, along with the novel and both television series, this one-shot was actually kinda nice. If you have a 5-year-old that you want to get into comic books, this is a nice little comic to pick up for them. The adorable illustrations and comical dialogue are just what the doctor ordered for a kid trying his or her very first comic book. Silly, non-violent, and non-offensive and simple dialogue, all nice for a child to grow that love for comics at an early age. The creative team did a wonderful job creating this adorably silly little romp through space. Kid-friendly colors and a few puzzles and games near the end just add to the pleasure for any kid to enjoy. Little Battlestar Galactica gets a try. The Shadow Now, Issue 4. This series places pulp hero Lamont Cranston in modern-day New York. I have to say I'm not crazy about this idea. Seeing the Shadow face off against a teenage girl, Khan's granddaughter, with a purple streak in her hair that texts all the time just seems wrong. The silly concept aside, the writing by David Liss was decent enough with Cranston and Khan playing a game of shadows. Good story and strong dialogue really make this issue. The illustrations and colors provided by Colton Worley are in line with what you'd expect from a Shadow comic book from Dynamite. Moody colors provide very atmospheric backgrounds and just add to the fine line work, especially on faces and close-ups. Like many that use this photorealistic style, though, his figure drawings are stiff, especially during action sequences. Overall, though, this was a nice issue. The Shadow recovering from a brutal assault by Khan that left his network of assets in shambles proves to be a compelling story in this issue. Not a good place to start the series if you're new to this title, but if you're already a fan of the Shadow or the creative team, then this is worth picking up. The Shadow Now, terrible title, I know. The Shadow Now, Issue 4, gets a try. Grimm, Issue 9. I'm one of those people that kind of liked the television show when it first came out, so I was hoping the comic would be good. It wasn't. Mark Gaffin and Kyle McVeigh's dialogue was pretty bad, and their story wasn't compelling at all. That moment when the monster has Nick dead to rights and decides to let him live for no real reason is just a cliche comic book move. The conclusion to the battle between the Grimm and the Haroshido was anticlimactic. As dull as the writing was, the illustrations by Rod Rodolfo were just worse. Honestly, the drawings and colors in this title were so bad, I just don't understand how these people got the job in the first place. To say the interior was a huge step down from Lucio Parello's cover is an enormous understatement. There's nothing to like here, and I'd advise everyone to just let this sit on the racks and spend your money elsewhere. Grimm, Issue 9, gets a pass. Lastly, there's Noir, Issue 3, featuring Miss Fury and the Black Sparrow from Dynamite Entertainment. This issue is a straight-up treasure hunt, which are always fun, as our two heroines go in search of Templar treasure, with a psychotic couple hot on their heels. Noir suffers from the same issue as Miss Fury, though, namely bad dialogue, though Victor does a better job of it than Rob Williams. Andrea's illustrations and Vladimir's colors are sloppy and rather unpleasant to look at, though Andrea's panel layouts and sense of motion are pretty good. Despite its flaws, the story was actually pretty good, and I'm a sucker for a good treasure hunt. Fans of pulp adventure will enjoy this issue, but fans of more traditional comics, those heavy on the action and superpowers, won't find much to like here. Noir Issue 3 gets a pass. Well, that's it for this fully loaded week of comic book reviews. I hope you all enjoyed it. And as always, we'll be back here with more Slideshow Reviews. Have a good one, comic fans.